So I've read a lot of comics this summer. More specifically, I've read a lot of Batman comics. Hello, my name is Jessica, and if you are new to this channel, I am a writer who also enjoys comics. You might have seen a video from my All Zatanna Appearances series where I go through every single comic book issue that Zatanna has been in. And yes, I still have a very long way to go until I complete that series, so every now and again I like to kind of just sit down, take a look at what I've been reading recently, and then decide whether to share it with you guys on this channel, which is what I'm going to do today. So one of the series that caught my interest was Batman Urban Legends. I got 2 volumes here. I actually have 3, but I only have 2 hands. So we have Batman Urban Legends Volume 1, which is a story with Batman and the Red Hood, aka Jason Todd, also his ex Robin, the one who died by the Joker's hand. I really enjoyed this book, especially as someone who just finished playing Gotham Knights on the PS5, and I think that's another reason why I started my Batman kick, because I was playing Gotham Knights and I was kind of obsessed with it for months, so I kind of wanted more Batman slash Bat family content, and I thought the way they wrote Batman and the Red Hood's relationship in this comic was really, really well done. Because they're usually antagonists, and because their ideals and morals are so different and they clash with each other so much on like a base level, it's interesting to see how they work together, and it's interesting to see how they also not just professionally, but personally have to work through their differences. The plot here follows a really interesting story about a new drug in Gotham that is laced with some unknowable toxin giving you a state of euphoria, and it's linked with Mr. Freeze, which isn't a Batman villain that you would associate with drugs, but the fact is, it works really well in this story. I feel the mystery element and the plot and the way things unravel is done very nicely. It's very clever, it's tight, and the villains are appropriately campy. And the fact that it is like a more street level investigation, street level crime, is very suited towards the Red Hood skill set. And it also connects with him on an emotional level as well, because he grew up in a household where his mother, I believe, was addicted to drugs, and the man that his mother was dating after his dad passed away was like a drug dealer, so he's very, like, he has a lot of emotional and personal stake in the case. Overall, I think it really works as a Batman and Red Hood team-up comic. It hits all the right notes in terms of the action, the mystery, but also the emotional beats that happen between the two of them, and they've really reached a nice point in their relationship where I feel like they've matured and they've passed that like New 52 arc, that New 52 era where they were just very antagonistic. So I like that. I like how they handled the kind of arc of their relationship. And I hope that we keep this in the lore so we can continue to progress and not regress in that fact. Alright, so the next book we're going to talk about is Batman Urban Legends Volume 3. Yes, I did skip Volume 2 because I wanted to go straight to the one with Zatanna in it. Sorry, don't blame me. And I probably will do a more deep dive of this comic on my All Zatanna Appearances series, but I will give you a little summary of my thoughts. Overall, I have very mixed feelings about this. I didn't like the story itself, I am very sorry to admit, which did leave me a little bit conflicted because if you know me at all, you know I am a stan of Batman and Zatanna. I love their friendship, I love their relationship through the ages. I like it when they kind of explore that romantic tension between them, even though I don't think that they need to be like an official couple. I don't need them to be endgame by any means, but I do like, for example, in the Paul Dini stories when he explores that relationship, that tension a little bit more. I like the way it's kind of hinted at in the animated series, Batman the Animated Series, where Zatanna shows up in, which I also have done a video on. And I do love when writers acknowledge that Batman and Zatanna are childhood friends, therefore they would have a very different relationship with each other to the rest of the Justice League. And I can tell you that this book tackles all of these things, all of these themes that I mentioned, But I think the plot is a little bit nonsensical. I'm so sorry. It's a little bit convoluted. And I know it's convoluted because I can't even re-explain it to you. So the central conflict is that Bruce and Zatanna, when they were teenagers, and they had like this little crush on each other. It was very like sweet young love kind of thing. And again, I should be the most excited person about this, but I am not because I really don't understand. But maybe you do. Maybe you can tell me in the comments if you've read this comic and see if what I'm gonna say is how you understood the comic. So they did a spell when they were younger to kind of bond their thoughts together. So, because that's romantic. But in doing this love ritual slash love spell, they release this ancient magical energy to the world. And the only way that they are able to stop it from destroying the world is if they redo. I don't think it's the same ritual. I think it must be some other ritual to put the thing back in the box. But they have to keep redoing it every few years. After every couple of years, they do the ritual and they pretend nothing happened and they grow further and further apart. And it gets to a point where their relationship is so fractured that the spell that they've been using to contain the thing doesn't work anymore because it relies on you really being connected to the person that you're doing the spell with. So this is where I get kind of lost. They get John Constantine on the case, and a bunch of magical stuff happens in between. But what I did like in all of that is the flashbacks to their past, to Bruce and Zatanna's past. There are a lot of really good emotional moments between the two of them, and especially in this comic, I've never really seen Batman look so sad. I mean, he's a sad man, but he has this usually like look of despair on his face. The look of sad in his face here, it's very like a heartbroken type of sad because Zatanna means so much to him. And no, they don't get together by the end of the comic, but they do repair their relationship when they kind of acknowledge the mistakes that they've made against each other in the past, mostly on Bruce's part. But yeah, I couldn't explain to you who the villain is, what they did, and how they fixed it. All I can say is that the relationship between Batman and Zatanna was really nicely done. I just wish the story was a lot better than it was. Alright, so next we're going to return to the New 52 era, which I know is gonna earn me some excited cheers by approximately 5 people in the audience. I'm just kidding. I don't get the hate with the New 52. I feel like with all eras, there are good things and there are bad things about it. Granted, the things that I will be talking about today, the comics that I've read from that era, are mostly bad. I try not to generalize these days. I try to keep a very open mind about things, but it is hard not to understand those criticisms when you're reading something like Batman Battle for the Cowl. This was another Gotham Knights motivated purchase because I was like, I want some more Bat Family content, and I've read Batman and Robin Eternal, and I saw this recommended. And I did heed the criticisms before reading this, so I wasn't, I wasn't going in naively. But this sure was a comic. I realized that Battle for the Cowl is basically evil Gotham Knights. The story goes that Batman is dead, and all of his successors, primarily Jason, Dick, and Tim, are fighting over who gets to be Batman next. So Nightwing and Robin face off with this guy who's running around Gotham in a Batman suit, but he has guns and he's trying to clean up the streets from crime with his guns. And he's saying, I'm the new Batman, I'm doing what Batman can't, which is killing people. And when you hear all of that, knowing what you know as a DC reader, you're like, that's Jason Todd. That's just Jason Todd under the mask. But it takes them a while to figure it out. I suppose they might not have, seen him out in the streets. They just heard rumors of this new Batman flying around. But they confront him eventually, and Dick's like, I know who you are now, you're Jason Todd. And I will say that Jason's version of Batman Coolest design ever. I know guns are bad. However, but look at this. Look at the cape that he has. Look at all like the little bullet packs around him. I don't know what you call these. I'm sorry. Look at the muzzle on his face that he's wearing. It's so dramatic. It's a really good mix actually of his Red Hood, more combat military outfit style and like the sleek Batman design. It's very nicely done, very iconic. However, he is a little bit deranged in this storyline. Dick doesn't want to be Batman. He's the oldest of the Bat Kids, he's the first Robin, and he's just like, this is too much responsibility for me. That's not what he said. But he spent his whole life trying to move away from Batman's shadow. So he's like, I don't want to put on the cape. But this person who is killing and maiming people on the streets is putting on the cape, so maybe I should. But in all the time that he's deliberating this, Tim has put on the cape. Tim is the youngest Robin, I think at this point. No, actually Damian's here. Damian is in the story. But Tim puts on the cape, confronts Jason, and Jason stabs him, leaves him for dead. And as like his whole secret lair crumbles around him and nearly kills Tim, Dick comes in saying, where did you put him? I know you didn't kill him. And then it just ends in this whole confrontation where Dick finally puts on the cape and he's fighting Jason and he's like, where's Tim? Where did you put him? Jason's like, I killed him. And Dick's like, I know you didn't. If you killed him, you'd be dragging his body around everywhere. Yeah, I don't know. It ends with Jason dying as well. After all of that, Jason just falls into a river in the fight, and I don't actually know what directly follows this comic, like canon-wise. I don't know if like they found Jason in a future comic, like in a sequel or in one of the other Batman comics, or if they just kind of pretended that this whole thing never happened. If you know the answer to this question, let me know in the comments down below. I just think it's pretty funny that the battle for the cowl is between A, a person who hates Batman and everything he stands for, B, a person who actively does not want to be Batman, and C, yeah, I guess a person, Tim, who wants to be Batman but isn't very good at it. Alright, I know you're going to be excited about this next one because I'm going to be talking about everybody's favorite Dick Grayson comic. The critically acclaimed, the fan favorite Grayson comics, Agents of Spiral. Again, volume 1 and 3, although I did read volume 2 this time just on Kindle because I couldn't find a physical copy of the second one to order online, so I just read it on my phone. I will say that Grayson is unexpectedly more fun than I remembered. So Grayson is another comic from the New 52 where fan favorite Dick Grayson, who is also Nightwing and the very first Robin in the Batman universe, he becomes a secret agent or a spy in this international organization, this network called Spiral, and for simplicity's sake, it is basically a James Bond parody set in the DC universe with Dick Grayson as a Bond-like character. The idea here is that Dick Grayson is presumed dead at the beginning of the comic, and because of that, because of the fact that he is kind of a ghost in the world right now, in the waking world, Batman decides it's the perfect time for him to infiltrate this secret organization called Spiral. Because Dick Grayson is working in a secret spy organization, there are so many threads of lies and deception. Sometimes the person that he's supposed to fight is actually on the same side. We have a few Midnighter cameos in this comic, which I really enjoy. I love the character of Midnighter. He serves as a pretty fun foil to Dick Grayson, who is very much, he's not suited to the spy life. This is actually one of the more interesting parts of the comic. There's a lot to do with him figuring out his own identity, especially outside of the role of Nightwing, outside of Robin, outside of the superhero mantle that he wears. It's also impossible to talk about this comic without mentioning the most infamous thing that it's known for, which is the objectification slash sexualization of Dick Grayson. Sorry, I had to do a little because I kept on mispronouncing the word yeah. He's put in a lot of situations and positions that you would expect to see female characters in. Spy movies, for example, just gratuitous shots of him being very topless, women making remarks about his appearance, women trying to flirt with him. And I think so far, up to volume 3, it really hasn't gotten to a point where it's like uncomfortable, although it has gotten to a point where it's a bit like, okay, we get the joke now. I mean, can we move on from this? But yeah, overall, I have enjoyed Grayson more than I thought I would, because I think the plot is actually pretty engaging, despite the fact it being very complex. I feel like it might not be convoluted, it just has a lot of moving parts, and I feel like there should be a good payoff when we get to the end, based on the last few volumes, so we'll see if I change my mind then. Alright, so the second to last comic I wanted to talk about, which I do not have in my hands, as you can see, is Batman FailSafe. After reading Batman FailSafe, I realized that it reminded me of another story that I had read or seen somewhere, but it wasn't a Batman story I could think of, and then I realized, because I watched it like a couple weeks later, it reminded me of Justice League Doom, the one where Batman makes contingency plans for all of the Justice League in case they go rogue, and obviously it goes very badly when it gets activated because it knows all of their weaknesses, and of course he didn't tell any of the Justice League about this, and they're all very mad at him. But Batman Failsafe is basically the exact same concept, but just for him. So he made a contingency plan for Batman, which is like this sentient robot AI. It takes us on a pretty fun ride of, you know, it trying to outsmart Batman and Batman trying to outsmart it. And aside from being a classic Batman story in that way, it's also a very classic Batman and Robin story. Tim Drake is the main Robin in this story, and I really love the way they characterized him and the way they characterized him and Batman's relationship, especially their professional relationship. I feel like Tim is very self-motivated in that way. He was Robin before he was adopted by Bruce Wayne, so he was Batman's partner before he was Bruce Wayne's child. Because he's the more like intellectual of the Robins, he takes a very pragmatic approach to the crime fighting. I think I remember a bit in the comic book where he described his role as Robin as being similar to child soldiers. You know, whether you like it or not, whether that sounds like a cause for concern or not, that is kind of how he sees them and how Bruce treats them. You know, I enjoyed Tim Drake's perspective in this comic book as much as Batman's, and I feel like they work as very good foils. In the end, Batman does manage to defeat this thing, but not before uncovering some secrets that his subconscious held. I read this one quite a while ago now. I didn't read it as recently as some of the others in this list, so I think I will have to go and revisit it to really understand what was going on. But I do remember thinking that it ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. Alright, so we're finally at the last comic, and if you have made it all the way here, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking around. Let me know in the comments if you have actually read any of these comics, or if you're now interested in any of them. If none of them have caught your fancy just yet, I will say, I think this last one would be the one that I would recommend to you and to anyone else looking for a new read. I'm sure that hardcore DC fans have already read this, but I'm always late to the party, and because I prefer trade paperbacks for the most part, I'm usually a little bit later on catching up with comics because I like to wait until these come out. But Batman and Superman World's Finest by Dan Mora and Mark Waid, honestly one of the best comics that I've read in recent years. So we know that there have been many iterations of Batman and Superman over the years. Sometimes they have an antagonistic relationship, but most of the time they have a very good working relationship, and it is acknowledged in canon that Batman and Superman very much see each other as equals. They were the first superheroes of the DC universe when nobody else was around, when they didn't really have other superheroes to rely on. They're very good friends. They understand each other like nobody else does. And this comic is a throwback to the world's finest comics from the Silver Age, back when we had Batman, Superman, and Robin going on their little adventures together. And again, I feel like what DC Comic has been doing really well recently is that they've taken on these classic characters and they've been retelling their stories in a modernized way without losing the essence of them, which I think is what people were complaining about in the New 52 and to an extent Rebirth. I feel like World's Finest has a very nostalgic feel to it. I mean, it's bright, it's colorful, it's optimistic and full of hope, but it's still packed with action and tension. In the comic, Superman faces this villain who takes away his powers or like threatens to kill him at one point. And so the stakes are that high, but you're never really worried about it going to like overly grim and like depressing routes. You're more excited to see how Batman and Robin are gonna solve the problem. And I didn't realize how much I missed seeing him back in the Robin role until I saw this comic. I feel like I haven't seen a Dick Grayson Robin comic like in a very long time. I can't remember when the last time like he was actually Robin in canon, before Tim came along or even before Jason came along. Like I don't know if they had, because they made him grow out of the mantle like a really long time ago, and I love him as Nightwing. I love that character development, but they have really done a great job in putting him back in the role and making it fresh and new for like a modern audience and for a new generation. Again, all of the designs, I think the art here is particularly gorgeous. It really shines. It conveys a very specific tone that is bright and optimistic and just an all-around fun time. So I would recommend this comic to anyone out there looking for new reads. If you're someone completely new to DC Comics, pick it up. If you have been burned by DC Comics in the past and stopped reading for a while, pick it up. And that's the end of the video for today. They've started doing construction outside, so I feel like I can't have this go any longer because this is already a very long video. Thank you for sitting with me and listening to me talk about Batman for what was probably way too long, but I had a lot to say. We had a lot of books to get through, so I have no regrets, and I will not apologize. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos like this in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!